And thank you for joining us today for the Post-ISA Council media briefing. I'm Anne-Sophie Bredel, the head of the communication department of ESA, and I'm here with Dr. Josef Aschbacher, the Director General of ESA, Renato Krpoun, the chair of the ESA Council, and some of our ESA directors. As always, we will start with preliminary statements from the chair of the council and from DG. And upon the conclusion of these opening remarks, we will then take questions. I would kindly ask you to indicate on WebEx or the WhatsApp loop that you wish to ask a question. And when it will be time to ask question, to state your name and media outlet before asking the question. Now I give the floor to Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Anne-Sophie. Also from my side, welcome here to ESA HQ, to those who are in the room, but also to those who are remotely watching the media conference today. Let me first start. We had the pleasure to have an address by the Commissioner for Defense and Space, Andrius Kubilius, who gave an address to Council yesterday. The European Commission has also put this statement online, which emphasized also the importance of the good cooperation between ESA and the EU. We also had discussions regarding the critical challenges, and in particular, of course, the impact of the US budget cuts, which were discussed at length by the member states. Then, in terms of business, of course, CM25 preparations, we're full in the preparation process. We also had some discussions on the formalization, the subscription process, the choreography between the member states. Some of you are familiar with the document 100, how we are going to handle that during the CM25 and during the months which will lead up to the meeting. And we are here also looking into a way to give you more transparency and indicate already by the end of the second day of the CM, which means the 27th of November, to give you more detailed figures regarding the subscriptions. Then we adopted the financial statements. I'm very pleased that we had a clear audit assessment. We had no observations, and it was approved by the member states. And here, a big congratulations to the ESA executive for the work which was done. And the ESA 2024 annual report, which includes the ESA consolidated financial position and financial performance, is now available on the ESA website. Further, on the workforce matters, member states endorsed the reform of the ESA entry-level programs with the creation of the National Graduate Trainee Program, which will be aligned to the ESA Graduate Trainees EGT programs and have the same employment conditions in the future. And finally, certainly one or the most important topic, ESA the convention was signed on the 30th of May 1975 by 10 states. As of this year, we're 23 member states, 3 associated states, and 1 cooperating state. And for half a century, ESA has been serving Europe as its space agency, inspiring the citizens, inspiring many generations in the past, and hopefully also, as they did in the past, in the future, and be adding a lot of public value. And we will hear some of the recent successes by Josef in just a minute. I think this anniversary will certainly allow us to reflect on the last 50 years, but also to reflect on the future, and in particular also how do we want to commit to the future of ESA. And I think with this year's ESA Council at ministerial level, we'll have a very good opportunity also to put into motion the strategy, the ESA 2040 strategy that was discussed and decided earlier this year. And with that, I hand over to ESA Director General. Josef, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome also from my side, also particularly colleagues here in the room. Really very happy to see that. Let me also say that a number of directors are here with me as part of my executive board to obviously come in when more specific items are coming in their respective directorates. So thank you, Renato, for mentioning and praising the 50 years of ESA. ESA has come a long way in the last 50 years, from 10 member states to 23 today. But much more important, we have delivered a lot of successes. We will actually publish very soon a small booklet, 50 years, 50 successes, that should highlight some of the 50 years highlights of the last few decades. But let me come back to the report on Council. There we report, and I usually make a status report, an overview on the main achievements that we had over the last few months. That means since the last Council meeting, and obviously I will then elaborate a bit on decisions and discussions that we had in the context of Council. One of the points which we have highlighted, and I always underline, ESA delivers. This is what we are known for. This is what we are aiming for, that we deliver successes for Europe. And one of them is the upcoming launch of Sławomir Uznanski-Wisniewski, the ESA astronaut of Polish nationality, project astronaut who is being launched with Axiom 4 from Kennedy Space Center these days. But what I also would like to underline is that we have together prepared with Poland, but also our ESA colleagues, a number of experiments. There are 13 Polish experiments that we have developed, focusing on human research, biology, biotechnology, material sciences, and technology demonstrations, including artificial intelligence, and ESA experiments, especially focusing on astronaut health. So this is really quite a full mission. We look forward to the launch and obviously the successes and the work in space. Also, I'd like to mention that recently I received a letter from the minister in charge of space from the Czech Republic. Also, the Czech Republic is intending to have a flight in the future of a project astronaut, most likely on BAM Mission 6. And we are at the moment discussing with the Czech Republic together to prepare experiments also for that future mission. So just to say that there's a lot also on that front happening on our side, obviously all in order to gain experience through the experiments that are happening there, but also to gain experience and prepare ourselves for the post-ISS scenario that will obviously involve commercial space stations. Some of the other highlights I was reporting to Council. We had two successful launches in the last quarter. One is the launch of ACES, the Atomic Clock Ensemble in Space. It was launched on the 21st of April on SpaceX, which was part of a commercial resupply service mission to the International Space Stations. It is now installed on the Columbus external payload facility. There's a 6-month commissioning phase, which has just started, and the mission will be running for about 2 years in terms of collecting science data to really answer questions of fundamental physics and timekeeping, also validating or verifying some of the elements of the theories of Einstein. Another very successful launch was biomass on the 29th of April on Vega C. Was an excellent injection, was both a success for the launcher, Vega C. It was the second launch of Vega C, and for biomass, obviously, as the mission, which is an Earth Explorer mission, a very unique one. I personally know it very well. It's a P-band radar, the very first P-band radar, synthetic aperture radar used for Earth observation, and looking at the forest biomass globally. The mission will last at least 5 years in terms of time required to do a census of the biomass of the trees, tropical forests in particular, in order to have a better knowledge of climate change, carbon budgets, and making sure that we have a good understanding of one of the parameters that is not well measured on ground. The first images of biomass will be published at the Living Planet Symposium of ESA, which will take place from the 23rd to the 27th of June in Vienna. Then we had some other highlights to report. One is the opening of the European Space Deep Tech Innovation Center in Switzerland. I'm very happy. The chair sitting next to me was also hosting this event together with one of the 50-year celebrations that we had in Switzerland, the 50 years of ESA. And this is quite an important center. It is really, as the name indicates, looking at deep tech issues, deep tech innovation, artificial intelligence, robotics, material sciences, and is linked to the ETH and EPFL environment in terms of academic surroundings. We also have initiated work at the Cybersecurity Operations Center in ESOC in a new operating room. As you know, cybersecurity in ESA is in 3 sites, in ESOC in Darmstadt, in Esrin in Frascati, and in Redu at ESEC. These centers have different responsibilities, but also serve as backups for each other. Obviously, for cybersecurity, this is fundamental. We also received the very first light, as it is called, of the Fly-Eye telescope. This was happening on the 4th of June at the Fly-Eye telescope, which is at the moment stationed in Matera, but eventually will be brought to its location in Sicily, which should happen in the near future. We have also published, and I've shown to the delegates yesterday, the very first image of the sun's south poles as measured from Solar Orbiter. It was then also published yesterday afternoon on our websites, and many of you have actually reported about that. But we had a big preview of these fantastic images, and I have seen the press coverage afterwards, which is very impressive. I'd like to really take the occasion to thank you from different places where you are reporting about this initiative. It is so important, and we rely on your reports and your stories on what we do and what happens, because this is exactly the messages we would like to send to the wider public to see how our missions deliver exciting science results for society, for people, for the economy, and many other aspects. So really big thank you to all the journalists who are listening in and who are doing a very, very good work every single day. Another update I gave was Proba 3. Proba 3, as you know, was launched at the end of last year in December by ISRO. And we have now received the first coronagraph pictures. This is 2 satellites flying information, as you would recall. And we will release the very first images, the very first data next week on Monday at Le Bourget at the Paris Air Show. Again, there will be a live event submitting this data to the wider public. Some other updates which I presented to Council. As you have seen also in the media, I have signed a joint statement of intent on cooperation for HRE, for human and robotic exploration, focusing on the first LEO and then on the moon with ISRO, the Indian Space Research Organization. This was done in India on the 7th and 9th of May at the occasion also of the GLEX meeting, which took place there. A very important highlight because it also underlines a long-standing cooperation which we have with India, which is now renewed and actually extended with a new focus also on exploration. Canada. I was last week in Canada with a delegation of my directors, and we met the colleagues from the Canadian Space Agency, plus representatives from government and industry. It was a very short, very intense, but a very successful mission. I would like again to thank Canada for the hospitality, but also the excellent discussions which we had, which is, of course, a cooperating state of ESA since 46 years. And when I was there at the headquarters of the Canadian Space Agency, I was reminded that for 25 years, there was not an ESA Director General visiting the Canadian Space Agency headquarters. So it took 25 years. I'm very happy that we had this interaction and this meeting, but also there was a very good reason because Canada is also preparing its contributions and subscriptions for ESA at the ministerial conference at the end of this year. We got renewed and strengthened interest from Canada to be a strong partner in ESA, stronger than the previous ministerials. At least this is the intention of the preparations right now. And I can only say Canada is a very solid, a very respected, and a very good member as a cooperating state in ESA, can participate in almost all activities, and I really look forward to an intensification of this activity. Talking of international partnerships, international activities, of course, we had a long debate also on the impact of the budget proposals that have been made by the United States. You're all extremely well informed because you're reporting a lot on the various aspects of it. So I can assure you that we had a very deep discussion also with member states, and a very constructive and a very forward-looking discussion. And this is, of course, work in progress. There is a lot of analysis and options that need to be verified and need to be discussed. But in brief, the main highlight or the main point is that we have agreed, or member states have asked us to make sure that Europe is increasing its resilience and autonomy for its very own purpose, to make sure that we have the technologies and we acquire technologies that we need in the near future. So this is certainly the overall trend, where we say that in all future evolution aspects, not only in exploration, but also in science, Earth observation, and many other domains, that we want to increase our resilience, autonomy for the missions and activities that we require. Within this framework, of course, we have been looking into detail on the various proposals that are made. I should also underline once more that this is an ongoing negotiation in the United States. It is not for us as ESA to comment on these negotiations or leave alone to interfere. This is certainly not our mandate, but we are impacted on quite a number of domains that are, at least at the moment, proposed for cancellations or reductions. And of course, there we have done our homework, and we are doing our homework on analyzing what is the impact and what could be options and measures that we could take in order to make sure that the investments that have been made by our member states are utilized in the best possible way, maybe redirected if needed, or even new activities that are being brought up and initiated in order to do that. Also, this will require that some of the activities may be frozen. That means put on hold, especially those activities that are linked to possible cancellations of activities. I say possible because, as you know, the budget negotiations are ongoing. We expect that this will be finalized in fall, which is the usual US budget cycle. And by then, of course, we have certainty what the decisions will be on the US side, and therefore what the impact is on our side. But certainly we will be ready. We will be well prepared because we are studying deeper with our member states the various options and implications. Also, I think one recommendation that was given to us by the member states is, apart from increasing our autonomy and therefore seeking ways of compensating for some of these technology blocks that we require, to also seek reinforced partnerships with other partners if the US would eventually drop out around the globe. I've mentioned Canada before, but and ISRO, but we are, as you know, in very good contacts. We are known as a reliable, trusted partner that has always delivered and will continue to deliver on its promises. So certainly we will continue to do so, and therefore seek also international reinforcement of our international partnerships, which we have. Of course, all this is in the light of the scope of preparing our ministerial conference 2025, because some of the decisions that will be made will have an impact on our current proposal, and this is done with our member states in a very iterative process. We have the next meeting of Council and Council Working Group in the beginning of July, and certainly there we will come with more detailed analysis, but also with a very clear roadmap of what would be the decision milestones, what to do. In short, we will prepare our options. Of course, no cancellations or of that kind will be done, because the decisions on the side of the ESA are not yet made or not yet finalized. So, of course, we need to wait for the final decisions on the US, but certainly on our side, we will prepare the future in order to reinforce ourselves, and obviously decide also on some cases where we need to move forward given the circumstances, because also waiting costs time, as you know. Maybe some other updates from Council. So this was a bit longer on the US budget situation, but I'm sure this is something that has been of interest and was also widely reported already. On Council, we have decided on the European Resilience from Space program. We have what is called approved the enabling resolution. This is a legal document that formally is a request from the member states that we should prepare the program with all the legal documents and the preparation of its content. So this will now happen. It will be under the lead of the Program Board for Earth Observation, but let me underline, this is a system of systems approach which has an Earth observation component, a navigation component, a telecommunications component, and these systems will be working together. Obviously, telecom being the backbone, navigation through LEO BND, and on Earth observation, certainly to build up this constellation. The chair has mentioned the speech of Mr. Kubilius to ESA Council, very powerful and very constructive, and I really would like to take the occasion also to thank the Commissioner for this strong support of himself and the European Commission, because there we work hand in hand together. This has been clearly expressed also by the European Commission. It's also my message to all my teams, and obviously the member states ask us and expect from us that we are working hand in hand in the preparation of this, not only of the ERS program, which is called EUGS on the side of the Commission, but the overall package of the European of the CMIN 25 activities, of at least of those elements where the Commission is also planning to fund some of this. So there's an urgency, as it was expressed by the Commissioner, and we are planning along this urgency various actions, and you will certainly see much more in the near future to come. We have also, member states have agreed on a number of cooperation agreements or activities that we do together with other partners. There was an agreement on amendment of the agreements for Camilla and Iride, two projects that we implement, one for Poland, one for Italy. This is, as I say, an amendment of the existing activities. We had approved an extension of the MOU between ESA and the United Nations Human Settlements Program, which is already in place and which will be continued for another 5 years. We have also extended the agreement between ESA and the European Maritime Safety Agency for an extension again for 5 years as of July 2025. There's also a collaboration that was approved by member states with the State Space Agency of Ukraine, SSAU, which is responsible for the development of Ukraine's space science, space application exploration, and international cooperation activities. This was following a request by the SSAU for the provision of technical assistance, and our member states have unanimously agreed to do so. So we will work with them on a focus on exploration, Earth observation for agriculture, and ecological monitoring services and space weather. Maybe a last word on the funding balance, the so-called treasury. We have made huge efforts last year through special measures. So that means an increased level of advance payments to our industry, in addition to paying partial deliverables to make sure that money is really flowing from our treasury into industry. This resulted last year in an increased level of payments, about in the order of 700 million more than projected at the beginning of last year as a result of these measures. And I think this was very much appreciated by industry. I received personally some thank you letters and messages from them, because this is, of course, important that the cash flow is well organized. Thank you for that, and we look forward to questions from your side.
Thank you very much, Director General. Is there any question from the room first? Yes, please.
Good afternoon, Jeff Faust of Space News. To dig in a little bit more on the discussions you're having on dealing with the potential budget cuts to NASA, I wonder if you can elaborate on what sort of contingency planning you're doing ahead of the ministerial, given that it's quite possible that the NASA budget for 2026 may not be completed by the time you meet in late November. In terms of at what point do you have to decide to move forward or not move forward with specific programs or make changes if there's still no budget yet from NASA when you meet at the ministerial?
Thank you, Jeff, and I will then hand over also to Daniel and also Carol and Simonetta, because there are 3 programs most affected, at least on our side, exploration, obviously, but also the science, what we call space science here, what is falling under the science terminology in the US, which also on our side is Earth observation. So, yes, you're absolutely right. The cycle, the timing is expected to be maybe just before the ministerial, that the decisions are being made and the fiscal year 26 budget will be known for sure. But of course, we need to prepare our future for Europe and for Europe's autonomy. And this is what we are doing, that we are looking into all these possible impacts. Don't want to dwell too deep in it because this is, as you can imagine, work ongoing, and there's a lot of issues involved, from more large generic issues all the way to industrial issues that we need to consider in this planning. But it's clear that we need to assess on one side, how much does it cost to wait, and how much does it cost, how long can we wait, because there will be decision points coming up on our side when we need to decide, when we need to make decisions. We will put this at the disposal of our member states, and then we will need to make the necessary decisions of either waiting further or moving ahead. This will be clearly communicated, obviously, to our partners. That means NASA, and therefore making sure that this is a good dialogue. I should also underline that we have close interactions with NASA on all these activities. They have been briefing us before the budget release, so I really appreciate that. We have a very open and transparent working relationship since decades, and certainly this is something that we will utilize in order to make sure that on the individual elements we understand well what is more urgent and where, in which direction the different decisions will most likely point. Daniel?
Yes, thank you, DG. On the exploration, of course, we are part of record programs of NASA on the International Space Station in particular, but then on Artemis with Orion ESM, but also Gateway, and at Mars ultimately with Mars Sample Return. This is where we have the biggest focus. On top of that came now in the recent news also the topic of Rosalind Franklin being at a different level of magnitude. But now, just to develop a little bit what DG said, I mean, on the one side, our contracts are running. And I think this is very important. We continue. We are having running contracts. We have technical milestones, and we monitor our industry according to the performance they do as a default position. Of course, we anticipate options, and we do it in two ways. Number one, that we study with industry what alternatives could be done. I give you an example on the European Service Module, which, by the way, we have delivered 3 ESMs up to now to our US partner. The first one has definitely overperformed. It's a marvelous vehicle. And we are studying with industry what could be alternative options. It's a potential tug. It's a potential, can be used for dedicated missions. We are having today industry studying options on top of delivering according to the baseline. The second point is that we build in the implementation of the contract technical elements which we would like to see as a potential reorientation. I give you also an example here, the Earth Return Orbiter. We develop according to our baseline. But if we would like to reorient, we have to make sure that technically this is feasible. And this is what we are making sure with industry right now.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So let me give you, to start with, a little bit of a sense of the preparations we've been doing in the Science Directorate for the Ministerial. As you may know, in ESA, it is a mandatory program. And so we've been working with our Science Program Committee, which is where our 23 member states' interests are represented, over the last 2 years to build a strong and robust proposal for Ministerial 25. We have presented that at various bodies within ESA, our various committees and council have that as well. And with the support of our Director General and our 23 member states, that remains stable for Ministerial 25. The 2 pillars of that really are to finish delivering the Cosmic Vision Strategy and to begin Voyage 2050. So as Josef said, stabilizing our leadership and our present for Europe, both industrially and scientifically, and also anchoring our future. Now, we have worked for many years in warm and mutually beneficial collaboration with our friends and colleagues at NASA. We wait to see how the processes in the US will develop. We obviously have done our due diligence in terms of taking the presidential budget proposal and working in detail through the technical annex. And that was, the analysis of that was presented to our Science Programme Committee last week in a workshop and to our council delegates this week. In summary, we have about 19 missions in common with NASA, and also international partners such as JAXA are similarly impacted. And we've analysed all of those, and we believe that with good planning and with the capabilities we have within our programme, we can potentially mitigate impact there for about 16 of those. We're looking at 3 potential missions that, should the budget proposal come to pass as written, would require recovery actions. That's LISA, Envision, and New Athena. Now, our member states adopted LISA and Envision last January, which is the process that we go through with our member states where they give us permission to implement those missions. So we've done all of the technology preparation, and then they all approve moving forward with industrial contracts. And we will continue with those. New Athena should come for adoption in 2027. And the point that I would like to underline is that we value deeply the collaboration between Europe and NASA. But we do have the technical capabilities in Europe today, should it be necessary to reproduce missing elements. And that's something that we're now working through the detailed processes with our member states to take their guidance, that when we come to the ministerial, we will do our work for Europe, and we will work with our member states to take their guidance should mitigation be needed when the budget processes in the US in October pan out. And this is a yearly process for us. Thank you for your question.
Yes, thank you and good afternoon. On the earth science part, the budget proposal is also impacting activities in NASA. We have had an initial assessment and initial bilateral discussion with NASA colleagues. We have an excellent collaboration with NASA on earth science since decades. And actually, there are some missions which are specifically mentioned to be cut in terms of budget that are impacting the collaboration. One of those is Crystal B, which is the second model of one of the Copernicus expansion missions. So we're looking at options how to organize granting the continuity of Crystal. You have Crystal A, which is already with a radiometer provided by NASA in integration at industry. The second mission, which is specifically mentioned and cut, is Sentinel-6C. So 6B is planned to be launched, and that's not touched, and that's the good news, end of November this year with the US. 6C would be impacted by these budget cuts, and there again, we are looking at potential options for granting the launch of 6C with the instrument on board, which would be for 2031. On the other hand, we don't have a clear understanding yet of the implication of these budget cuts in the collaboration that we really strongly have with NASA on calibration campaigns, on airborne campaigns, on climate variables, on data platforms, and all of that. And I think what we are doing, we are looking at that much more in depth. We are assessing that, and we are also considering this an opportunity overall for Europe to really invest and keep being strong on the environmental issues, climate issues overall.
Let me add one point. It's a bit of I think an interesting point on Sentinel-6. Some of you may remember it was actually my proposal at the time when I was Director of Earth Observation to rename the satellite into Sentinel-6 Michael Freilich. Michael Freilich being, of course, a very eminent leader of NASA. It would be really a pity if especially Sentinel-6C would not be funded or supported, which is a successor, obviously, of this mission, which of the Michael Freilich mission, which is still in space. But just to also show how good the cooperation is with NASA, that we have offered from Europe, which is the Sentinel-6 mission is mostly funded, the majority funded by Europe, that we have offered our satellite to be named after a NASA administrator, a NASA manager. And I think this was a very visible sign of the deepness of the cooperation.
I will now take the question from Davide Castelvecchi from Nature, as it's related to the current statements. Dr. Mandel mentioned that ESA can mitigate the impact on 16 out of 19 missions. What are the 3 missions for which it cannot be mitigated?
I'm sorry, I didn't fully understand the question, because I think. Yeah, sorry, I thought I answered that. So I mentioned LISA, Envision, and New Athena. Let me repeat my comment, because you may have missed it. So 3 missions that we believe may require recovery actions. LISA, which is the gravitational wave interferometer, which was adopted by our member states for implementation last January. Envision, which is the mission to Venus, which has a NASA instrument on board, which again was adopted in January of last year. A New Athena, which will be the world's largest X-ray observatory. That's due to be adopted by our member states' approval in 2027, and for which the technology is ready for implementation. Thank you.
There is now a question in the room.
Thank you. Alain Sirou, Ciel et Espace. You said Europe must increase its resilience and autonomy. I understand each word, but what you mean exactly by resilience? How to increase resilience? What means this word exactly in your idea?
This is not a philosophical discussion. This is something that is very practical. So that means on those elements where we are relying on technology from other partners, we would like to develop this technology ourselves. I take one concrete example, which is also on the list of items to be possibly not funded, which is the contribution to the Rosalind Franklin rover. There are 3 elements in particular. One is the launcher, but the other 2 are technology elements like the RHU, the radioisotope heater unit, and the braking engine. And these are technologies that where NASA was kindly offering to provide these components, because today we do not have this technology in Europe. And that's why, of course, we will engage in Europe to develop these technologies. It will take time. This is obvious, but this is one example to answer to your question.
Thank you.
Now a question from Peggy Hollinger from the Financial Times that I was asked to ask. Was funding discussed for the new satellite program, I guess ERS, addressed by Commissioner Kubilius yesterday, surveillance and PNT? If so, is there a rough estimate of the cost?
The cost is certainly something that will develop over the time. This is probably the beginning of quite an important new development, but we will start it stepwise. That means a first phase, a second phase, ESA funding, followed by EU funding, and then again, future ESA fundings and EU fundings. I'd sometimes take the parallels to Copernicus, which of course you start with one program at some point, then the Commission funding comes in, then again ESA funding. So it's really being built up over the years. So what I'm saying is that this is certainly a very important, I would say significant or ambitious program. But I can say that as an order of magnitude, we are planning for the ERS proposal. That means the constellation that should be built up of very high resolution optical radar data with computing and AI capabilities on board, including the necessary ground segments. As an ESA first proposal, something in the order of 1 billion. And this is a system of system approach. So the exact funding and the implementation steps and so on are yet to be identified. But this is the level of size that we are discussing with the member states right now. Of course, this is, as all our program proposals, in evolution. So the figures may be different in October, they may be different in November, but certainly this is the order of magnitude. But just to say, in other words, it's a serious step. It's a quick one. Also, Commissioner Kubilius has really made it crystal clear time is of the essence. We have to reinforce our effort and come with a significant contribution, because time is the new currency, some delegations were saying. So time is just as important as money, or it's both as important. But just to say that this will not be a very timid start, this will be something quite significant. Of course, I always say this with a big caveat, if member states subscribe to it in November.
Thank you. There is now a question from Peter Deselding from Space Intel Report. Peter, can you hear us and can you speak? Peter? Maybe I will take the question then from Thorsten.
Hear me now?
Oh, okay. We hear
Sorry
you.
about that. Yeah, sorry about that. Joseph, I got a couple of questions for you, basically flowing from the remarks yesterday from Commissioner Kubilius, which is a fairly remarkable speech. I guess in passing, I wonder what the Swiss delegation thought of that speech. It was a very muscular military speech. And maybe we can save that for later. My question are, first, are you still thinking about a ballpark CMIN 2025 budget volume of 23 billion euros as we speak today? I know that might modify between now and November. Is that the ballpark you're looking at now? Second, Commissioner Kubilius talked about the resiliency EOGS program. They've come up with some high-level requirements based on 2 industrial studies of what this means, what kind of high-resolution imagery for Earth observation they need, with a 30-minute revisit time anywhere in the world. It's a big program. And he said that this will the high-level requirements are going to constitute a political mandate from the Commission to ESA. I think I know what that is, but maybe you could clarify just what that means. Does that mean the Commission commits to paying a portion of it, or just what are the details? And finally, there was a discussion in his speech, he referenced the ESA EU attempt to blend their programs to make it a more smooth single system, not for every program, not for science perhaps, but certainly for anything having to do with resiliency and Earth observation, navigation, and telecom. And he talked about engineering proposals that ESA has submitted to the Commission about how this might be done. In other words, how ESA can work with the Commission much more smoothly and quickly. Could you give some details about what he meant by that? Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. And I fully agree with you. The speech was very powerful and I think extremely important, and very grateful for the clear expression in front of our member states of the strong cooperation that we have built up. And as you have probably seen from other occasions, Peter, we had several interactions, and this is really something that works very well. And I can only be grateful for this good cooperation. On your question on the 23 billion, whether this is the ballpark, yes, the proposal that we have discussed with member states yesterday, today, and also the day before is still of the same order of magnitude. But I should also say that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, as you know very well. So this is our working assumption. It will be adjusted a little bit here and there as we go from one meeting to the next. But yes, we are still talking of similar amounts, if with a slightly modified content, obviously influenced partially by the discussion we just had on the US budget and some other elements. Your other question was on EOGS. Yes, EOGS is the terminology which is used by the Commission. We use the terminology ERS. It actually is one and the same. There may be a new name found, which is a bit less acronyms, but something a bit more poetic. But this is the same thing on our side, obviously being an element that will flow into the future build-up of EOGS and will be an early element. As you know, the MFF funding will only, or the MFF will only start in 2028, and funding will flow a bit later. So therefore, we basically gain 3 years of time. In fact, this was something you have also written about just recently. And yes, we are really encouraged to do this very well. You talk about this single system. As I mentioned, this system of system approach, which does really combine the flagships of future IRIS², of Galileo and LEO PNT, also navigation activities where the Commission obviously plays a very strong and leading role, and the new element, the ERS element, which is Earth observation, again, which is partially building obviously on some Copernicus investments, but this will be a new system with new characteristics and new performances. This single system, as you call it, is really something that we have in mind. We call it a system of systems. You can believe me, it will be a lot of work to identify all the elements in order to get there, from the various interests of user requirements, our member states requirements, Commission requirements, and so on. But this is really work in progress. But what we have agreed already with the Commissioner and his team is that we have a joint task force between the Commission and ESA, with members on their side and our side, to really work on a day-to-day basis in identifying all the elements that we need to address. And it's a lot of work. It's very deep work. Believe me, this is not an easy one, but we go as we go. And if I may add a personal note, I have gone through this cycle once 20 years ago when we were building up Copernicus. I see a lot of parallels coming up now in making sure that you can work between these two institutions in a good way. But I think one ingredient is extremely important. If there's a will and there's a way, and if both parties are committed to it, then you can make it work with all the complications that may arise along the way. And I really have to say, I see this willingness very clearly on the side of the Commission and the Commissioner, and the very constructive spirit we have. So I think we have a very good starting point to really move forward very fast and very well. And on the question of what Switzerland thinks about, I think the chair of ESA Council, Renato, is better placed to answer to this than me.
I certainly will not answer on Switzerland's behalf at this stage, but I certainly can emphasize on the importance and the understanding of the importance of the cooperation between ESA and the EU by all its member states, and also the understanding and the discussions we had this week on the urgency of moving forward with this new program. Of course, the devil lies in the detail, and that will come when the member states and participating states to this program in the future start negotiating the various modalities. But I think as the member states have shown in the past, they always find compromises in the interest of Europe.
Thank you, Chair. Question from Torsten Kriening from Spacewatch Global, actually related to security and defense. I have a question for DG about security and defense strategic priority at CM25. How will a potential realization might look like? How will a potential realization might look like in the field of defense and strategy and security and defense at CM25?
Okay, thank you, Torsten, and hello from here. Of course, this is all what we are preparing now is the program proposals. That means the content. I have described the ERS activity just before. There's another one where we would like to sharpen our capabilities on the security-related and resilience-related activities, which is the preparation of technology elements. So basic technology, either through GSDP or basic activities. We have defined a roadmap. We have Dietmar here. We have Dietmar Pilz here. So if you agree, Torsten, I hand over to him because he, as Director of Technology, is in charge of putting this together. It goes across the agency, so it's not specific to one domain, but is really building up from lower TRL levels into higher TRL levels technology that is also of interest to the security domain. But over to you, Dietmar.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Indeed, since quite a while, we are working on specifically components and technologies which are interesting for what we call resilient security aspects. We've done a quite detailed analysis and brought this forward to a proposal for our member states. Put this into our so-called basic activities TDE programs, and as well into an optional program which we call GSDP. Have discussed this now quite extensively with the member states, took their inputs, got very positive feedback on many aspects, particularly, and I think this was mentioned before already, on the components on sovereignty for Europe in respect to technologies. And we are bringing this forward and looking quite positive that we are getting a strong mandate from the member states with the ministerial at the end of the year. Thanks.
Thank you. There's a question from Johan Chabet from Forces Spatial. At some point, the ISS will have some end. What about the plans for after in terms of European human transport autonomy and European station autonomy?
Thank you for the question. Great question, for sure. So first of all, and above all, let's not forget that at the moment we speak, we have astronauts training who are mission assigned to fly on the International Space Station, and I just would like to value with all the discussions we have across the Atlantic and in the day-to-day operations, we just have an amazing partnership which worked for over 2 decades. Now to the question on post-ISS, assuming that this would occur by the end of this decade, there are 2 elements, the transportation dimension and the destination and utilization. On the transportation dimension, we are building up our capabilities with a cargo vehicle. It's called LEO Cargo Return Service. So it has the possibility to dock to a station low Earth orbit and then to return and come back on Earth. So this is under development today. Of course, in the current discussions where we have to see how we develop our autonomy, we are also asking the question, how could we develop from the European side eventually a crew capability? This is an element which is on the table of the ministers since the Ministerial of Sevilla of November 2023, where we said that our cargo vehicle should have the possibility, if decided so, to be enhanced towards a crew transportation. On the destination side, we are clearly in a logic where we would like to go in a service logic, meaning that we are as ESA neither owning an infrastructure or operating it, as we do today as a partner on the International Space Station, but that we secure our interests by procuring services, which may entail a certain investment. This is open. And for that, we have different options, either a US commercial LEO destination. There are a number of companies involved into that. Also, European companies teaming up with US partners. That's an element. Another element is that in the context of bringing more robustness to our ESA 2040 strategy and also its exploration element is also that we diversify partnerships. DG just spoke about the document he signed with ISRO, the ISRO chairman last month. One element is also to evaluate the possibility to cooperate on the Indian base station. So we have a clear plan, and we'll certainly focus on one topic, which is the continuity of the scientific utilization of low Earth orbit and to allow European competitive and innovative companies to embrace the next dimension of economy, which will be in low Earth orbit.
2 questions now are related to international partnership. One from Daniel Chrétien, Futura Science. Talking about international partnership, how is the bond between ESA and UAE Space Agency? Any vision about a closer relationship within the Gateway program, for instance? Same question with the new Africa Space Agency. And second question related to that from Emma Getty, the Space Republic. Dr. Aschbacher mentioned the search for new allies in the event the US steps back from certain collaborations. He cited India and Canada. Are there any other potential partner nations currently being considered?
Thank you. I will hand over then to Eric Morel, being in charge of external affairs, among other things. But a statement first, whether there are new allies or other allies. ESA is probably the agency that has the most international cooperation agreements with, I would say, almost everyone, or with certainly many partners. We have more than 300 international cooperation agreements altogether, some of them very big, some of them smaller. So we do have already a network, a very strong network of international cooperation and a very good record, because as I mentioned in my introductory statement, we have always delivered our part of the agreements that obviously we have made. The main partners have been mentioned. India, we have just signed this statement of intent. We have also Canada, obviously as a cooperating state and therefore part of the ESA family. Also with Japan, I have signed a statement of intent in November last year for the next big cooperation, and the word big is in the title of this cooperation, of this statement. There we have identified 4 domains we would like to focus, from science to exploration, Earth observation, and also some horizontal activities more related to commercialization. So there's really, then of course, we also have many other agencies that we are working with. The African Space Agency you mentioned, the UAE. Also we are building up a really good partnership, good cooperation, both on the industrial level and agency to agency level. their impact on the gateway obviously is very significant as well. And I think they are doing just the same as we do in Europe to reflect on what does it mean and what are the options to proceed. So I cannot speak for them, but certainly I can assure you that we are on our side open to any cooperation that is, of course, always beneficial to both sides. This is a good cooperation, and this is certainly at the core of it. But I'd like to hand over to Eric, who has been really at the core of preparing many of these cooperation agreements which I signed, and also is in charge of external relations at large. Eric.
Thank you. Starting maybe with the African Space Agency, we were present at the opening of this agency in Cairo in Egypt, and we're looking forward to increase the collaboration with Africa. In this domain, we work also hand in hand with the European Commission, where we are there, let's say, space armed to implement a certain number of policies of the EU. As you have said, Josef, the cooperation with Japan is really today at a turning point. We are looking for the next big cooperation. And this is covering, as you said, all the domain, space science, but also planet protection, exploration, Earth observation. It is really deep, and it will be an important element in the CM25 package. Also with India, the signature a few days ago with the chair of the Indian Space Agency is a real a step forward, and it will be concentrated for the time being in the domain of exploration. And as you know, India has very important ambitions in this domain. We speak about Canada. With Canada, the relation is nearly as old as ESA, so there is nothing new. One element that was also approved at this council is a cooperation with South Korea that will be subject of a signature in October. And there we are speaking in the domains of operations and space weather. And this also is a first step in the collaboration with this country. So all in all, at CM25, the international dimension of the ministerial meeting is quite important. Thank you.
Thank you. A question from Anna Desmarais from Euronews. Are there any other partners countries that Europe could source technologies from for the Rosalind or other NASA-affected projects in the meantime, while the technology is still missing there?
No. Yes, in the context of Rosalind Franklin, DG mentions the two key topics, RHUs and the aerobraking engines. First and above all, let me underline that we have a very good and deep cooperation with NASA, which is ongoing at the time we speak. So baseline also here is that we get the deliveries accordingly from our NASA partners. Now, would this situation materialize that the US would stop the support to the Rosalind Franklin mission? The two topics are critical. Let me focus on the RHUs first, because the RHUs are needed anyhow for exploration. They are needed for Rosalind Franklin. They will be needed for lunar surface exploration to survive the lunar night. It is absolutely fundamental. We have plans to develop this in Europe. We have a roadmap. The roadmap is not matching the planned launch of Rosalind Franklin in autumn 2028. And therefore, we start to go to our closest partner. And we start, of course, with a partner who is sitting at our table here in this very room. It's Canada. Canada has capabilities, and we are exploring opportunities with them in this context.
Thank you. Actually, Peter de Selving from Space Inter Report has a question for DG, but also for Laurent. Was a possible future cooperation between IOA Square and Telesat's Lightspeed a subject for the meeting with the Canadian Space Agency?
Thank you, Peter. I think I hand over to Laurent straight away, because he he knows very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So we had great discussions with Telesat and Dan Goldberg. We met with Space Canada as well. There may be commercial discussions. There are no hard-gov discussions from operator to operator without a governmental agreement between Canada and the EU. So at this stage, this could not be envisaged for the governmental perspective.
Is there any question from the room? No, I have. Yes, please.
Jeff Faust, Space News again. To talk about the international cooperation again, is ESA considering perhaps increased cooperation with China to fill in some of the gaps if plans to cooperate with NASA fall through on some programs? I know there is some cooperation with China on some space science missions, but are you considering enhancing that in some degree?
We have some corporations which are mostly dealing with the utilization of data for climate change and Earth observation, as you know, the so-called Dragon project. We also have, which is ongoing, where scientists are working together on utilizing this data for the benefit of our planet, I should say. But we have the SMILE mission coming up. This was obviously decided many years ago and will be launched next year, fingers crossed. But all the preparations are going well, and we're looking for the next launch opportunity. Apart from that, at the moment, we have not initiated new discussions with China, so this is not at the moment on our horizon. But yeah, that's it.
There is one last question, and then we will conclude. From David Roenhild from ZDF German Television, coming back on the US budget cuts. Regarding the US budget cuts, you mentioned how concerned are you about the possible cancellation of the Artemis program. You also mentioned a possible redirection as part of ESA's current approach towards the US budget cuts. What could that look like for the European contribution of the Artemis program? And what would ESA Europe need to increase autonomy, as you put it?
Maybe I start and hand over to Daniel again. Of course, the Artemis program is a big element, and we, as you know, we are contributing significantly from Europe. It's the gateway, it's the ESM, the European Service Module, and it's certainly a very fundamental one. I also know that there's a lot of discussions, or I hear there's a lot of discussions ongoing in the US context. Some politicians trying to see whether this stop needs to be so sudden or a bit more delayed. This is not for me to comment, but just to realize that this is something that is a discussion ongoing. So therefore, of course, we need to base our decisions accordingly to what the final decision is in the US. But yes, the impact is certainly an important one. And this is one of the elements I mentioned earlier, where we will need to look very seriously what is our timeline, what we want to achieve, and how do we proceed in terms of our actions and proposals also towards the ministerial. But I hand over to Daniel.
Yes, thank you, Joseph. The main elements are Orion, ESM, and Gateway, for sure. But I would like also to mention Argonaut in this context. So first, on Orion ESM, we already mentioned the topic. We are delivering our ESM. So by the way, we are going to deliver this very year ESM number 4. So while we prepare for Artemis number 2, Europe delivers ESM number 4 this year. And as mentioned a bit earlier, we are studying with industry, with the industry consortium delivering the European service modules, also some alternative missions for an ESM. And we will continue to deliver the ESM as long as they are needed, because we are here together with NASA on the critical path when it comes to bring back US astronauts to the moon. Second, Gateway. On Gateway, while waiting for firm news, the contracts continue. I mentioned it before. I give you one example. IHAB, which is the European Habitation Module, is going full steam ahead today with a major significant European industrial consortium. And we will take it from the milestones. It is clear that we intend to maximize the reusability of our ESA gateway elements. But now the last point, Argonaut. Let me underline one key point, which is also part of our strategy. With Argonaut, we deliver a European landing capability at the lunar surface, which we will need first and above all to roll out our European plan, our European lunar exploration plan. It's a spine in this context, and it shows that we have our own capabilities from the European side. At the same time, it is part of the Artemis architecture, and it has been recognized last year by NASA as being an element of the Artemis architecture overall. So this architecture will see some reshaping. This is quite probable. But whatever happens to Argonaut, we will first use it for European needs. And it is an element of cooperation. Potentially, we could also deliver payloads from partners like Canada, to take an example again, to serve the Artemis program. And last but not least, it could also have a value in bartering our position with NASA directly in this context. So you see a modular approach, and I think this is part of an autonomous capability that you have options while cooperating at the same time, and it strengthens your position.
Thank you very much, Daniel. There is no further question. Oh, maybe, yes, Antoine?
Antoine Meunier, La Chronique Spatiale. Regarding what you say about Argonaut, does it mean that you have also a human approach for Argonaut?
Thank you, Antoine. I think this is an excellent proposal that we will put forward at a certain moment in time. Today, Argonaut is purely cargo, 1.5 tons for the first mission at the surface of the moon, cargo.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you, Director General. Thank you, Chair. We're at the end of this media briefing. We thank you all for your time. The replay will be available on our website and on our chat this afternoon. And we wish you a very good afternoon and a very good end of the day. Bye.